This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech. How many times have you said to others, or perhaps more importantly yourself, relax, damn it?
Well, today's guest is telling us all to relax in his book about living in these times of high anxiety.
Tim Caulfield is constantly writing about who we are and the foibles that make us human. Tim Caulfield, welcome to Believe in People.
Thanks for having me on, you guys. Really thrilled to be here.
Why do we have to relax? What is going on?
Oh my God. I mean, now more than ever. Now more, even when I first wrote the book, we all needed to relax, but now more than ever. And in fact, I really mean that. And I think the evidence backs this up. Our world has become more rage-filled. It's become angrier. There's more fear out there, and it's just simply not constructive. And I get why some of those feelings exist, but we also know that our information environment, right, our information ecosystem is driving those feelings. Can I give you one example study right off the top? Dive right in here.
Yes, definitely.
There was a fascinating study that came out, I'm going to say over the summer or this year. And it found that it looked at headlines over the last couple decades. So headlines in newspapers, and headlines that had rage, had fear, had disgust were all increasing, markedly so. And headlines with joy, they actually coded for that, joy, decreasing. And I think that is so telling, right? Because negativity and rage and anger and fear, it works, right? It generates clicks, it generates reads, it pulls in eyeballs, and hey, we got to relax.
How do we do that? I mean, well, first of all, I just want, Tim, you have written many books. I'm going to name a few of them, but
Only a million.
Yeah, there's a lot. And okay, A User's Guide to Cheating Death, which sounds, I haven't read that one.
That was a documentary, that one.
Oh, that was that Kevin said
that's the one that's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to watch that. Okay, great. The Certainty Illusion, What You Don't Know and Why It Matters. I just read Relax, Damn It. Then you wrote, no, in no particular order, The Vaccination Picture. This one's great. Is Gwyneth Paltrow wrong about everything? And The Cure for Everything, Untangling the Twisted Messages about Health, Fitness, and Happiness. Why is there so much misinformation? And it's just so, and we're so intrigued by, particularly celebrities giving us advice, and we follow it. What is going on in that whole space?
Well, I've been studying this topic for decades, and look, misinformation, especially in the health space, has always been a problem, but over the last 5-6 years it has become acute, absolutely acute. This is going to sound like hyperbole, but I don't think it is. I think it's fair to say that misinformation, especially in the health space, is one of the greatest challenges of our time, and surveys back that up. There was a 16 country survey done by the United Nations very recently, and it ranked the spread of misinformation right up there with climate change. Something like 87% of people think it's a dramatic issue right now. And it is, we've touched on it already. It really is our information environment just driving that misinformation, because unfortunately, research consistently shows that misinformation often wins in the information space. And yes, when that misinformation comes from celebrities, from prominent individuals, it's more likely to get traction. And there's a whole bunch of interesting reasons why that is the case. There was a study that right on point that came out, again, so much great research going on in this topic right now, that found that a scary post from a celebrity is one of the most efficient ways to push misinformation. And part of that is because it's a story, right? It's a narrative. And we also know that stories, anecdotes, testimonials can often overwhelm good science, and we're seeing that again and again right now. So I think, look, I could go on and on why what got us here, but I think those are some of the elements. And of course, social media and the echo chambers that social media creates another big part of the story.
Well, I would just like to point out that we now have, in the United States, where I am living now, we now have a TV doctor as the head of Medicare and Medicaid, Dr. Oz. So somebody out there must be thinking that these TV advice, maybe, maybe Dr. Phil can become head of something else as well. But you have a word for it, and your word, I think, came from the COVID and the whole. My son always used to say to me, that's why I'm rambling. My kid always, because I used to be in TV news, and my kid would always say, "We're all gonna die," and everybody says that. We're all gonna die, and it's like the price of postage goes up 2 cents. We're all gonna die. You refer to it as an infodemic. That is a great phrase.
It is.
What is it? What is it? And why do we still have it? And is there an antidote aside from turning off your cell phone, which is probably a good one?
Well, we can come back to that, turning off your cell phone, because I actually think that is part of the solution, right? Not when they're listening to us, but after, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, it is an infodemic, and I like that term because it refers to the fact that this misinformation actually has an adverse impact on our health.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone often thinks immediately about misinformation about vaccines, which has been incredibly normalized. But we can say the same thing about so many other areas of health. It's not just in the context of, the ones that we think about. You can talk about it in the context of diet, supplements, unproven therapies, and a topic that our team has done a lot of research on. All of these things are doing, measurable harm. It's doing measurable harm. And the other thing that I don't think is talked about enough, although we're starting to hear it more and more, is the impact the misinformation has on creating distrust in institutions. When I first started in this industry, and even I would say even like, again, 5, 6, 7 years ago, people would often ask, well, where should I go for my information? What's a trusted source? And you used to be able to say, oh, the CDC, Health Canada, the National Health Service in the UK, the FDA. You can't say that anymore because there is a significant portion of the population that do not trust those sources. Because, and this is an important point, and we have 2 research projects on this right now, actually, because they've been told not to trust those sources, right? They've been told misinformation. If you ask people, why do you distrust vaccines? Why do you distrust conventional healthcare system? Why do you distrust science? They respond with misinformation. They don't give I want to be, I don't careful not to overgeneralize here, but for brevity's sake, they don't give some nuanced response about, well, I'm not sure if they're covering who should get the booster appropriately. They'll respond with misinformation. So misinformation mongers, and some of these are state actors, by the way, they want to create distrust. So that's the other incredible harm that's done by misinformation. And really important caveat here, science communicators make mistakes. They've got to learn. We've got to listen to the public, and we've got to do better.
They're human.
But the vast majority, and news organizations, et cetera, but the vast majority of distrust is generated by misinformation. And of course, another really important caveat, there are communities out there that have for historical reasons, have justified reasons for distrusting institutions. And that's also very important to recognize and to try to remedy. But when you think about it on a population level, this huge distrust that we're seeing, most of it's generated by the spreading of misinformation, because it's just, unfortunately, it's really effective strategy.
Wow. And Tim, so where do we start? Like where do we start to trust? Should we believe? I mean, there's just so much out there, but let's start from the point of, okay, supplements, let's say. I know that's a huge beast, but I mean, where do you start? Like, where do you say this is good, this doesn't work, this is, garbage?
I think supplements is a really good symbolic topic actually, because it is, you're gonna hate this response, but I think the important thing is it's complex, right? And those selling supplements, pushing supplements don't say that. They say, my supplement is a game changer and you absolutely need
Yeah.
this supplement. And they don't say, well, the data is kind of mixed. There's some animal studies on this, and most of the clinical trials have been underwhelming or negative. You might want to try it if you want to. They don't say that, right? They say this is going to work, right? They're going to say this is going to work. And
Exactly.
look, I always joke. This is another reason I like this topic is because it also you have to recognize your own biases, and that's not easy. And I am a supplement cynic. I admit it out of the gate. Okay,
I'm happy to hear that actually. It's refreshing.
I've been following this topic for so long, supplements, and looking at the literature, and it almost never, the data almost never says this stuff is a game changer or it works. In fact, most of the data over time shows most supplements are not necessary, right? Look, really interesting conversations about vitamin D.
Yeah.
Really interesting, still evolving research on omega threes and that kind of stuff. And of course, if you have a clinically, go to your science informed clinician and you have a clinically identified deficiency, or you're a pregnant woman, there's a whole bunch of reasons to take actual supplements. But we're talking about the multi-billion-dollar supplement industry that's pushing all these products that are largely unproven. And by the way, often contaminated. Research shows that consistently. Often the supplement doesn't
Especially
have
protein powders, right?
all of the. It's a lightly regulated industry, right? I think we need to remember that. And so there's potential harms associated with supplements, and the evidence is iffy on the benefits. So I think it is fair to go in when you hear someone pushing a supplement to be skeptical, even with my recognizing that I have maybe a little bit of a bias here. And I do try to go, okay, what does the evidence actually say on this, right? On this. Um, in fact, one of my dear friends, Dr. Jen Gunter, I don't know if you know Jen, she's the Vagina Bible is
Yes.
one, yeah. So Jen is so skeptical of supplement. And I agree with Jen on this. She thinks that if a provider sells supplements, it should be a red flag for bunk. That's how bad the supplement industry has become. So if this individual, she goes so far as to say she thinks the whole pseudoscience industry is largely funded by the selling of supplements. So
Hmm.
I'll put it. I take zero supplements. I take none. I live in Alberta. I don't even take vitamin D. Look, people should get a sense of what's good for them, what works for them. Talk to their healthcare provider, and make science informed decisions. But enter this realm with your skepticism hat on.
Okay, so it's my turn to ask a question, and you said the word vagina, so now I'm all excited. Um, so I want to ask
I'm
you
interested
about
in
your
this
book.
one. Go ahead.
I want to ask you about, is Gwyneth Paltrow wrong about everything? I mean, that's a good segue from vagina to Gwyneth Paltrow, considering some of the stuff that she sells. So why write that book, and what
Yeah.
is the thumbnail of the subject matter?
You know what? It's a perfect segue, actually, because one of Gwyneth's most famous products, of course, was the jade vagina egg, which was
Yes.
completely. She
Exactly.
actually got sued for it and lost.
Hmm.
All these claims associated, and the reason I think is also a wonderful segue because it takes us to where we are today. When I wrote that book, and I think this is really important to highlight because people will often say, "Oh, Caulfield, you're so partisan on these topics." Uh, in the old days, the Gwyneth days, the good old Gwyneth days, when we were worried about jade vagina eggs and not the world collapsing, um, it was celebrity culture was largely, not entirely, coming from the left. It was kind of Whole Foods, new
Yeah.
agey,
Oh,
crystals, a
yeah.
little bit of that hippie vibe. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the health misinformation was emanating from, right? And so the reason I wrote that book is because I think in it, obviously, it's not totally about Gwyneth. It's really about the role of pop culture in shaping our health beliefs. when I wrote that book, it was really during that rise, and it wasn't that long ago. I'm talking about, it was like ancient times. It's not that even that old of a book. The rise of the wellness industry, this multi-trillion-dollar wellness industry that's doing real harm. And I thought she was sort of symbolic, right, of what was going on. So I always, sometimes when I'm giving presentations on this, I joke that we've gone from, Gwyneth's vagina to Tucker Carlson's testicles, right? Because now we have all of the same nonsense emanating. Remember, we started up kind of on the left, right? Emanating from the far right. And it's become so political. Every topic that we've touched on already has now become almost an ideological flag. And we can look at this from a nonpartisan perspective, right? Because this happens across the ideological spectrum. But holy cow, has this ever become about politics now? And that's really scary, because once it becomes about politics, it becomes more difficult to change people's minds, right? Because it's their personal identity, and it's, their community, right? It's their community, and it can be much more difficult to change people's minds. So that book, when I wrote that book, I was really trying to investigate, how pop culture, celebrity culture influences how we see the world. And, obviously the conclusions is that it has a really big impact, even if you don't realize it. Move forward to today, and Dr. Oz is running Medicare and Medicaid. Who would have guessed? It's like surreal.
Well, what about RFK Jr.?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I'm not going to pull any punches here. We can have interesting conversations about some of his other appointments. I'm disappointed in more nuanced ways with some of those other appointments. RFK Jr., that appointment is absolutely horrific, right? And I don't think we should sane wash this decision. This is absolutely horrific. People call him a vaccination skeptic, or he has controversial positions. That's simply not true, right? He spreads vaccine lies. He's a hardcore anti-vaxxer. Even if you just look at the consistent lie associated with the idea that vaccines cause autism, something that's never been shown to be true, and I think it's important to emphasize, has been shown not to be true. Like, research has shown it's not true. So he has done incredible harm. And then we can layer on top of that his beliefs on things like raw milk and things like fluoride, and his conspiracy theories around the FDA and unproven therapies in the stem cell space, where we've done a lot of research, is absolutely horrifying. And one of the things I'm most concerned about is just this broad normalization of pseudoscience and misinformation, which I think is already happening. It's already happening. You see the mainstream media talk, with headlines, kind of saying, well, he's got interesting ideas here, and it's just the whole basket is horrifying. There's nothing good about what's happening there.
No, you've got a lot of work to do, Tim. But
yeah,
you'll be busy
already happened. It's been a crazy couple of weeks.
I bet it has, because I mean, well, for instance, okay, if you could change one thing about how the public interest interacts with science, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. Okay, can I do three?
Yeah, please.
So the first thing is, I think everyone needs to have a greater appreciation of how science happens, right? So just understand the scientific process better. Science is hard, it's messy, it moves forward iteratively. It's not a list of facts, and if one of the facts is wrong, science is wrong. That's not the case. So just try to gain a greater appreciation of how science happens. Science is a process. It's not a list of facts. It's not a person. It's not an institution. It's a process. It's a systematic way of trying to understand the world. The second thing I think is to understand that evidence matters, right? Testimonials, anecdotes, really strong assertions by, talk radio, let's say podcasters. That's not science, right? You need good evidence. Get a sense of what the nature of the evidence actually is. And the last thing I'll say, and this goes to the put your phone down, pause for a moment.
Yeah.
Reflect. Our information environment is so chaotic, it's so and noisy, that those headlines, the reason that rage and hate and grievance wins is because we see it on our phone. And, the studies have shown that very few people click past the headline to get a sense of what's going
Good
on.
point.
A very recent study found that 40% of people now get under the age of 30 now get their news from podcasters, right? And another study from influencers, not even from podcasters, from influencers. It's a broader
TikTok.
category. And a study that came out again just days ago found that 60% of those individuals do not fact check what they share, right? So think of it's like a worst case scenario. So I invite people to pause for a moment and embrace accuracy. So studies have shown that pausing, even for a moment, this is research done by people like Gordon Pennycook at Cornell and David Rand at MIT, and it's been replicated by other laboratories. Even pausing for a moment, just taking that beat, you're less likely to believe misinformation, less likely to share misinformation. And I think there's a bunch of stuff going on there, but part of it is it takes the emotion out of it, right? It takes that my team won or my team's being treated unfairly. It takes that out of the equation a little bit and allows you to kind of reflect on, okay, what's this evidence really say? Is this true? So understand what the science actually says. What is the nature of evidence involved? Hey, and let's all just take a beat. Let's all relax, right? Let's just slow down for a moment.
Well, I was going to ask you if you could think of some kind of supplement that the three of us could come up with so we could become trillionaires. And we'd still do the podcast, obviously, but, we'd be doing it from the Grand Caymans. But then, that was a joke. But you talk about relax, damn it. Just before we go, because our time's almost up, what makes you anxious?
So you know why I call it, and it's funny because I know you people are writers and authors too. I wanted to call it relax, damn it, and different countries took out the damn it. And in the paperback they took out the damn it. So in Canada the paperbacks just relax too. And
No,
I put relax.
No, stop. They took damn it out in Canada?
Actually, no, that's true.
It's true. And in England, they never had the damn it.
Are you living in Florida?
Look at that. There it is. I didn't realize that.
I love that cover, though. I love the coffee. Cheers to coffee. But
yeah,
the reason I had the damn it in there is it was supposed to be kind of a layered title, a little bit of self-deprecation, right?
Yeah.
It was supposed to be like I was speaking to myself, reminding myself.
That's kind of Canadian, isn't it?
Yeah, it was like, you know what, Tim? Relax, damn it. Because as you can tell, I can be a little bit wound up. So I'm so passionate about this topic. I do let myself get a little bit wound up. So I think we all need to remind ourselves to relax, damn it. Take that beat. It's better for your mental health. It's better for your critical thinking skills. I think it's better for social interactions. Let's turn down the rage dial and let's turn up that joy dial that we talked about earlier, right? And I think just reminding yourselves all to do that, even in these times, right, where it does just seem like we've all gone off the rails. It's more important now than ever. And that doesn't mean that these topics that we're all talking about aren't critically important, but let's come at them, after a little bit of reflection.
And that's really great advice because it's true, because we're just flipping through information and it's just overwhelming. And you see, I mean, even with exercises, you see the most ridiculous exercises, but people actually will download it and do it, and it's doing more harm than good. So yes. And with supplementation, it's, wow. What's your favorite topic right now to study before we go?
I am absolutely fascinated in and how people just embrace and love unproven therapies. I'm fascinated. I just did a documentary on something called the manosphere. Do you know the manosphere?
No.
So so the manosphere is this. Think Joe Rogan and Huberman and it's like men pushing. We all need to be more manly, right? People are irradiating their testicles, drinking urine. I'm absolutely fascinated by this. Hey, and it had an impact on the election, right?
Yep.
Young men,
I read that.
this idea of traditional masculine norms being,
Yep.
being left behind. And so I just did a doc for CBC called
Mhm.
Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, where we explored the manosphere. And I talked to, people across the whole socioeconomic, demographic spectrum, and it was really insightful. It's a fun documentary, if I may say. We have a
Mhm.
lot of fun with the topic, and we do try to be very empathetic about it. But I'm absolutely fascinated. This is an incredible trend that where we're kind of looking backwards, in this almost regressive kind of way for our guideposts, and kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
For males, do you think, does Jordan Peterson fit into that category?
Oh, for sure. I think Jordan Peterson would be in that category. And then you have really absurd people like the Liver King. Have you heard about him? He eats only raw meat, and it's this idea that if you were more manly, you'd be happier and healthier and more successful. No evidence to support that. And society would be better. And again, no evidence to support that. And we do come to the conclusion, of course, if that's the path that you want to walk, awesome. If you love those more traditional norms, fantastic, right? But we argue that it's that pressure to have a narrow view of masculinity that's doing the harm, the rigid, narrow view. And what we really want is let everyone walk their own path. My two of my kids are in it. My two boys are in the doc, so that was kind of fun.
Oh, good. When's it coming out, Tim?
It came out October 23rd on CBC, The Passionate Eye, which is our documentary.
Lovely.
Yes. Oh,
Uh,
great.
yeah, yeah,
Probably available.
and
Probably
hopefully
available
it'll
on
be
CBC Gem.
Yeah,
CBC
Gem.
Gem, yeah, and hopefully it'll be available all over the world soon, soon.
Well,
Excellent.
as someone who was 12 and sent away to the Ben Weider Academy because I was having sand kicked in my face on the beach. You're probably too young to remember those ads in the back of
Oh, I
comic.
remember
I
them
remember
well. I,
them.
I
But
joke about them
it,
in my forthcoming book, actually.
well, it seems we haven't really gone that far, or we haven't progressed that far, have we really?
No, we haven't. And I joke in the book, and I actually wrote an article about this. When all of my haters, I get a lot of hate mail, they always call me Timmy, right? They call me Timmy. Hey, Timmy, or Timmy,
Yeah.
because they're trying to emasculate me, like as
Yeah.
if that is an insult, as somehow that my mom called me Timmy, my buddies called me,
Hey man,
still call me
Tim
Timmy.
Horton was Timmy.
Timmy. And so in the documentary, my dear friend, Tim Okamura, who lives in New York City, he's a very successful artist, famous artist. The two of us, we go to a tattoo parlor and we get Timmy tattooed on our
Oh,
arm.
that's amazing.
We're going to own it.
Oh, that's amazing. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, you need to watch this podcast so you could see Tim's really cool tattoo.
Yeah.
That's really great. So Tim, given that our time is coming to an end, but we ask our guests every week the same question, but given that there's so much misinformation and anger and frustration and fear, why should we believe in people?
I think, people often ask me, do you have anything good to say? It's always such bad news. And the great news is when you have a crisis like this, you have all these wonderful voices rising up. And I'm seeing that happen with science communication. In fact, I was involved in a meeting right before our discussion where there were all these wonderful, diverse science communicators being creative, energetic, passionate about their topic. And it does give me belief in people and in our future. We don't need old voices like this. We need those creative voices. You know what? They're there. They're going to make a difference, and it's a reason to believe. And it makes me think that candle in the darkness, it's not going to go out. It's always going to be there, guiding us forward.
That's great.
Tim
Thanks,
Caulfield,
Tim.
thank you so much. Timmy Caulfield, thanks so much for being with us on Believe in People.
And Tim, just a quick question. What's your new next book? Do you have a title for it?
I do. That is The Certainty Illusion. Is the
Oh, it
next one
is.
coming out January 7th. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
So I'm
Thank
glad.
you.
Thank you for mentioning it. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And,
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Really appreciate it.
all right, so Amy, before you start advertising your new exercise techniques in order to, I just want to say what an honest and frank and interesting and entertaining conversation. Thanks very much for Tim for talking to us, because the world is full of it. There's a cure-all for everything, but you know what? Lots of times the cure is inside, right?
It's so true, Kevin. And, I have to say, he would certainly save us a ton of money. I mean, just imagine saving in supplements. I just feel really good about that. So Tim, no, I mean, he's really the go-to guy for straight, no bullshit information.
Take a breath. If you read it, take a breath. Maybe
exactly.
Do some research. Don't be so darn lazy. Do some research and find out whether or not you're getting bullshitted or not.
Exactly.
We're not bullshitting.
No, we're not. So people should subscribe to Believe in People, because we do not bullshit you. We believe in you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. There you go.